before us.
Oh,
Yeah,
so
let's
you and
let's
Noah.
make some real commitments around here.
Yeah, we're
Mm.
live. We're live, everyone. I'm gonna share with everyone the fact that we're talking about having our hard stop. So sometimes we're on CPT and sometimes we are not. Today we're going to see where it takes us. It's beautiful to be on our own time, though. Welcome everybody to our live stream. I'm so excited to be here. This is our Black History Month. I was thinking about this morning, Sunday Safe Spaces. And it's such a blessing to be here with Wes. Good morning, Wes. He's an hour ahead of us, y'all, in the Midwest.
Good morning. Good morning.
We have Alecia Dawn. She is an amazing human being. We've connected for quite some time, like right around COVID, all through then. And she's just a beautiful soul. And I asked her, like, will you please grace us with your presence, your knowledge, your wisdom, your essence? And she definitely said yes, which I was so honored because I know you're so busy. And she is a mother. She is an advocate. She is a fellow yogi. We've been teaching yoga both for a very long time. She runs her own stuff. She is a businesswoman and an entrepreneur. She is an artiste. And for that, we're wanting to lift her up and bring her wisdom to this space. So welcome to Sunday Safe Spaces, Alecia.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So we're ready to kick off this morning. Can you share yourself with our group? And then I'll, after you do that, I'll introduce the topic that we're going to be talking about.
Sure, I would love to. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Alecia Dawn. I am a native Pittsburgher and an arts worker, community educator, yoga teacher, artist, creative wellness entrepreneur, all the things. And I am the founder of YOGAMOTIF, which is a creative wellness yoga studio based out of Pittsburgh. We're celebrating our 4-year anniversary in a few weeks. I think I'm like approaching March. Like, is it still winter? First day of spring. And so we've been really honored to be able to share healing spaces with folks, offering yoga, prenatal yoga, hatha yoga, trauma-informed yoga practices, arts and yoga experiences, including our yoga paint party workshops. And before all that, I have been steeped in the arts for the majority of my life. And so my background is in fine arts. I have a BFA in art and design with a focus in sculpture and ceramics. And my master's is in arts management. So I went on to help and support and consult for small nonprofits and help people create their small arts-based education programs in Pittsburgh and around the country. And then after I had my little baby, I was like, hold up. Life gave me a whole opportunity to rest. And like many people who I kind of observe on Instagram who like they have a child and they're like, oh my God, mothers are not supported. I had the same exact moment. I kind of shifted and transitioned a lot of my focus to think about how can I begin to offer these supportive spaces that I have always been kind of steeped in my life to people who are now in my scenario, who are mothers, people who may not have access to childcare, who need to try to access these spaces in ways that are really supported in the community, places that allow children to be present or screaming in the background. And I just began to think about how does healing and wellness kind of integrate into that as well. And so I started to walk more deeply in my yoga practice, which has always been present. And I opened YOGAMOTIF in 2018 to kind of explore that synergy between wellness and art and motherhood. And here we are today.
So excited. Thank you for all of that. And what you speak to aligns so much with what I believe and what Wes believes. Like, finding your passion and recognizing how wellness supports who we are holistically, individually and as a community. And that's one thing we all have in common, right? We're all raising these little Black kids.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Black joy and we're going to talk about legacy. And I'm so excited to talk about that. Wes, you brought up the whole thing about legacy.
It's always about legacy for me. I think about I'm growing up still. Every day I grow, right? Like I love saying that, but just being brought up as a Black man, in America, because that's where we are, but just acknowledged around the world, the legacy normally stops, that has been shared with us. It's like there's no advancement when it comes to those that are leaving legacies within our community, or it's not talked about on a higher platform. I think in the last 2 years we've done a great job. But prior to that, the history books stopped around the 60s and 70s. When you think about women, it wasn't really never shared about women until later on. I think Hidden Colors maybe was the first movie that I seen that actually spoke of like Black excellence in something in a different field, right? And that was women. And so just kind of speaking about legacy, I think that it's important for us when we're talking about Black History Month is to have these conversations because we're leaving and creating our legacies today. And there's been so many people before us, the generation before us, the generation before them, the generation that they learn about, right? But there was just a missing gap. And I think with us having a platform like this, we're all creating our own legacy. And it's just important for us to acknowledge where did that legacy shift change, within our community. I can always, determine it was the crack epidemic, but we'll go there another day. Or we can go there today, right? But at the same time, it stopped somewhere. And so just wanted to be able to add a little bit of that layer on top of what we're talking about today. It's because like I said earlier, we're creating our own legacies, but we have embodied the legacies of those that were able to create before us. And that's paved the way for us to do what we're doing today. And so for anyone watching, you are a legend today. Your story is a legacy. Your journey, no matter where you are in life, as long as you're trying to become better, within your life, you're creating that legacy, you're creating that story. And so didn't want anyone to think of when we're thinking of legacy today, and this month particularly, as just something where we're going to be like, oh yeah, Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, like, yeah, there's some amazing people, Harriet Tubman, all of these amazing human beings. But we want to talk about today. We want to talk about how do you pave that way to leave that legacy, of your last name. How do you get yourself into a point where now you're making an impact through the lives that you're surrounded by every day, which now that lives on when you're gone. Like legacy is just that. Who are you impacting today that you can shed light to them, that they're speaking highly about you when you're gone, rather you're just out of town or you're disappeared for a year. It doesn't matter. Or you just leave this earth and go to something more special. The whole thing is, does your name live on? And that's what we're here today.
I love that. Alecia, that's what made me think of you, like leaving that legacy. And you're not only, I would love to share ways in which you see yourself leaving a legacy. And I also love the fact that you're taking care of the portals of people, women who are bringing the future into this world and who are raising the present, right? So I would love to hear what you have to say about drop your wisdom with us. Legacy.
Sure. Thank you. And Wes, I had to take like 37 notes just now. I was like, whew, yes, inspiring so much thought. So thank you for setting the stage for this. So many things. One of the things that you brought to mind when you were talking just now was thinking about the balance of like acknowledging the history, right? The legacy and like the history and the ancestry that is present in our lives. And in addition to like the history of trauma that we know is there, but the history of like joy and success and and the strength that are present in Black communities. And so just being able to acknowledge all of those accomplishments so that we can kind of stand on the shoulders of giants and learn and grow from that, and also recognize that you are also a part of that. Like someone's going to be standing on your shoulders too. Like you have information that's going to be passed down. So just what you're making me think of is just thinking about that balance of so that you can feel even more powerful, and knowing that you're not starting from scratch, right? Like you're starting from a deep history. And also thinking about and then I'll kind of dive a little deeper, but you also made me think about just like how sometimes I remember hearing about like all the Black history facts when I was in my little after school program in elementary school, and hearing about Ada B. Wells and, Thurgood Marshall and just going, okay, these people are not people I can relate to. And this is really, I was like 8, I'm like, I don't understand how important this is right now. And I don't understand how I can even put like make any impact into this type of conversation. But just recognizing that like how powerful and influential like you really are, like even whenever you're standing next to giants or standing on the shoulders of giants, or thinking about just the ripple effects of significant characters, like that you can be one of those significant characters too.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I was listening to another podcast, I think it was Hidden Brain, and they were talking about the power of influence and how most people didn't realize how influential they actually were in like all these studies. And if people actually really were able to recognize, like even my daughter, like thinking about legacy, like even my daughter, this child is my muse. She's 6 years old. And she has no idea how those little notes and those little things that she says, how much they really influence me as like, not just as her mother, but just like as a human being. And just recognizing that even as a child, and trying to think about instilling this idea that you are powerful and influential from birth, right? As a Black people, like just from birth, and that how can we be more intentional about cultivating that power and cultivating that like influence. And I'm not even talking about on some like Instagram influencer, like, I'm just talking about just like the things that are even more significant, like just the people. I mean, although that would be great if everybody could like me right now on Instagram and I had 1 million followers. Yes, I would like that.
In the chat.
I'm not saying I don't want that. I would love that. But
All
since
of
that's
us.
not something I can relate to right now, I'm talking about my sphere of influence in my community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just thinking about how even in those moments, maybe that they seem maybe smaller, they can be just as influential and deep when it comes to making an impact with just the small notes of information and joy and love and strength that you can kind of communicate to the people around you. I know I feel like I went all the way left field, but that's what you just brought out of me. That's what I was thinking.
No, I thought it was I thought it was good. I like how you just referenced some of the things, but no, I think it's important to just talk about the now. And I like how you said, like, how do I relate to those things? Like I know it's something, but how do I actually relate? And I think that's the part that I was stressing earlier about us creating our own legacy, or acknowledging that we're doing that, because it's the world is shifting, and so we can't just relate to what was the norm 20 years ago. You know what I mean? And so like right now, hey, those teenage young men, they need a gamer that's creating a legacy for them. You know what I mean? Like their life is different. So like for who they're looking up to is going to be someone that created success differently. Some of them were like a YouTuber, right? And that's who's creating a legacy for them to follow a path. And so it's kind of more when things are instilled, we also have to pay attention. Like I was just going to buy this hoodie the other day, right? And this hoodie was all these legends, right? Like all these Black history legends. But it was mugshots. Every picture was a mugshot. And what it was for me was a realization that even though these people created legacy, they were beat down, they was discriminated. They wasn't like, they were creating change, but also being like bounded in chains, you know, by the perception of society. So yes, they created something. And what I'm getting to is that we're living a lot more free. And so when we create our legacy, or at least embody it, we should be able to show people how to live in free without the perceptions of other people, without having to feel like we got to make sure that we can get and share the same water fountain. Like those were adversities that they had to face on top of creating a legacy, you know? And so for us, it's like, well, we have freedom, or we should pay attention to our freedom. And if we pay attention to that, then we can actually start to focus on how do we impact people and individuals around us, as well as get the seeds that are planted organically through like our children, as you spoke of earlier. You know, like these are seeds that are getting shared with us every day. We just got to find a way to take those seeds and be inspired by them the same way as we can take a quote from somebody 40 years ago and still say that this is now, right? Like what's now is different. Like now is even everything we're talking about on this call. And so I really liked what you said, even like it should just be more relatable history. You know, as Black men, most of our legends and legacy was anyone in sports. I thought about it when I was in the shower this morning. Like I never played sports. You know, I would never play sports. But for me, that was like the legacy that I had only thought of creating. You know, like I was just going to be this sports player. Like I couldn't see a lawyer. I couldn't see someone in farming, you know, agriculture. Like they're there. But where are those legacies that put us different than the perception that society already sees us?
And that's a good point, Wes. They're there, and they have been there because we had to, because we were only in Black communities. We were only allowed to be within ourselves, and we thrived. You know, some of the older generations, I've heard some people even say, like, back in the day, we had our own and we were better off for it. But media plays a really big role in portraying the lane that they want you to stay in. And I loved, Alecia, how you're talking about intentionality, because we do have freedoms now that are different than what we had before, but we are still bound. Wes, you always say that. You're like, before I was in this wheelchair, I was in more bondage as a Black man on 2 feet than I was than I am now.
Yes.
Right. And so being able to be intentional and to like almost take the veil off, like take the blinders off. You don't have to be a sports figure. You don't have to suffer. Alecia, in your space, like Black women die more often than white women from giving birth today in present day. I reposted something where they don't listen to Black men. They don't listen to Black women when we say we're in pain or we need more support. You could have the same income as somebody else who is not Black, walk into a hospital, say, you know, my kidney hurts. And they're like, oh, okay, go home, drink some water, where somebody else might get some tests and get some results. So to me, the concept of us stepping into wellness spaces like we do is to support us so that we can live in our legacy, so we can walk upright. And although we're not in bondage in the same way, how far have we come? So I think it's beautiful that we're talking about being able to leave the legacy. And part of it is the arts. So we got real excited. Like, Alecia, I think you're almost an anomaly. Not that there aren't others, you know, that's another thing. Like, we are special, we are legendary, and there are so many others who are as well. And there's so many artists, and the arts are a really beautiful way of being able to speak in a different form, to voice ourselves and to experience joy. So when we had our pre-talk, you know, I was like, Alicia's an artist. I know you do the paint parties with the yoga mats and everything. But then we got into this whole thing about pottery. And so I wanted to talk about leaving legacy through, you know, the arts, and then dive into that that lane. So, Alecia, do you want to share a little bit about your pottery? And I know Wes is going to share a little bit of what you do too on the screen.
Oh, sure. I feel like there were like so many points that you all just touched on. So
you tell us what you want to touch on, and we'll go.
And I got to get back to the pottery.
No, but you can go back. We could go back to
I'll do all the things. I got my little notes here, and I just feel, I feel like you all are really speaking. You're like right on point when we're thinking about what the struggle looks like right now. What does racism look like right now? What does the civil rights movement, social justice, Black Lives Matter? What does that look like right now? In this moment compared to even 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I was looking at something on, I don't even know what it was on TV, and just thinking about, I said that came out 15 years ago, because that person couldn't say that on TV right now, right? And so just thinking about even in our recent history, how things have shifted, and being able to, and accountability has shifted, right? And in many directions, I feel like it can get a little bit extreme. But just thinking about what does that fight look like, and how does it look different? How does fighting, white supremacy look different depending on even who you are, right? And so, someone who is in a corporate space versus someone who is a community member versus someone who may be having to deal with that friction with my neighbor, right? Like, depending on where you are in your life, thinking about that all, staking your claim and really being active in this movement is just really something that I just wanted to I'm thinking about in this moment, how that just looks different for each person and where they are in their life. For me in my life right now, when I'm thinking about the reproductive justice space, as you touched on, and being able to support Black women, I was talking with her name is Key. She's the founder of Elephant Song Doula Services. And she reminded me in conversation about one of the ways that we protect ourselves from that trauma and that injustice is like really having deep joy practices and being able to offer ourselves. And I'm not even talking about like that surface level Instagram, there's like a horse frolicking in the meadows and you're happy. I'm talking about that like deep, rich, like invitation of joy, so that it really supports your mental health and your wellness. And specifically in the birthing space, like being able to laugh, like that really, it can speed up your labor. It can make your contractions more productive. It can allow your birthing experience to be more, to be safer and healthier, right? And more enjoyable. Thinking about whenever someone is nursing, if they choose to, thinking about being able to experience letdown, which is the experience of milk actually being released from your milk ducts and then being able to actually come out of the body, like being able to experience that if you're in a better mood, right? If you're laughing, if you're watching comedy. And so even on those like smaller scale, like smaller as in like it's just you and, another person as opposed to like the world watching, that practice of joy and that integration of being able to kind of combat like racism, and thinking about the fact that even, and what I mean by that is that Black women are less likely to breastfeed compared to white women, right? So even like in that like scenario,
yes,
inviting joy is just one way that you can support that building of legacy in your own life, right? Inviting joy in your birthing practices, in your parenting practices, in your mothering practices, and being able to do it in that way. And so one of the ways that I've invited joy, thinking about art making, thinking about my muse of my child who destroyed all my art materials during the pandemic, like just completely chose to color and paint and Crayola on everything. Like our walls are covered in mountains, crayon mountains, and smiley faces everywhere. She reminded me of how much art making and being creative is really a part of our like genealogy, our history, our ancestry. We are a family, and we have a legacy of being makers. I learned that my great grandfather I think he was going to get maybe a master's or a PhD in architecture or something like that. He like built a church. He was a bricklayer, but he built a church. He was an architect. I'm not exactly sure what the language was, but as I learned about the different trades that existed in my family, and I see my child taking all of my materials and drawing all over our home, I was reminded, I was like, oh yeah, this is something that I actually need to return to right now. And so after having a deep history in clay and in ceramics, and touching on it a little bit after I received my bachelor's, but mostly kind of doing administrative and kind of entrepreneurial things, I came back to it during the pandemic, whenever studios opened back up. And I was actually I was connecting with somebody. I was messaging somebody on Instagram, another Black pod.
In the DM.
I was like, hello, your work is really nice. Can you please tell me where you did that? How you did that technique? And people have been so wonderful. Yeah, that's something from one of the pieces I created this past summer. And it was a reminder as I was connecting with this person how much I don't see Black faces in this work, and why that has happened for me. And one is that, which is very different from like drawing and painting or even printmaking, is that ceramics is a really equipment like driven material. And there's like certain things that you can do at home in your backyard. Like some people do like fire things like in the earth, and they'll like fire a piece when they're clay, and they'll get the clay out of the ground, they'll fire it in the ground, they'll have a low fire piece that they can use in their home. But most of the time, if you want something that is a little bit more mature with your own creative process, you need like a very expensive kiln, you need a lot of space, you need a lot of time, right? It's kind of hard to do if you are working another full-time job and you are a caretaker to family members or friends. And so as I was like connecting with this other Black ceramic artist and this other community of artists, I was realizing how important it is to be in a space of care, like of community care, of collective care, in order to really maintain that legacy of this arts practice. Like it's very hard, like not that you can't do it, but it's very hard to maintain this practice by yourself, considering how much startup capital you would need to just have your own kiln, and if you were to choose to do something on the wheel. And so I was just reminded of like it's a reminder of something that is consistent in my own practice, is that when we do this work, how important it is to make sure that we connect with other people, that we talk to other people, and that we're maintaining community so that we can continue maintaining this legacy. And even during the pandemic, most of my work shifted, right? Because I did not have access to those things, which is, if you go to my Instagram, you'll see a lot of digital works. And even being able to respect that of yourself. Like whenever we can't access all the tools that we think we need to make something, that we think we need to make art, like what tools do we have to maintain your own joy practice? Like what does that pivot look like? I know everybody was talking about the pivot in the pandemic, but what does that pivot look like in those small moments so that you can continue to maintain that joy?
Well, you totally inspired us. Me and Wes are going to Pot LA, which you guys can look at, because it's a Black collective.
Yep.
People who do pottery, and my cousin she was going there, and I'm always like, I'm so glad you're doing that, because ain't no Black people going to make some pottery. But that's not true. That's not true. Our Indigenous ancestors had to make pottery, right, to actually function. Right. And I'm excited to. I think that's the whole thing about expressing these things in these 28 days. But literally just thinking about we had to do everything, right? Like we did it all for so long, and then it was forgotten, and it was forgotten due to systems. We were, and it's unfortunate, but we were
kind of built to be the workers, to be the laborers, to still be the slaves. You know,
and the creators, the slaves were, I mean, when
they
you
were the creators, but
they were
without the lack of knowledge, the things they created were stolen. You know, and still to this day, you know, if you're not picking up a book to read, you know, your thoughts and ideas can be stolen again. But I think about just, you know, Alecia, you said something earlier about, you know, I think about being Black and disabled. And I made a post on LinkedIn the other day about, you know, I'm like, where are all the Black disabled change makers and visionaries? You know, where are they been highlighted in Black History Month? You know, where are the ones that made differences in the 60s and the 50s, you know? And I'm like, well, that's never really shared either. You know, and it's like the direction of what wanted to be shared to lead us into certain lanes is kind of the only thing that was exemplified. So like ceramics and things like that, like you see me drinking out my cup. I love my cup, but I can, you know, I'll be honest and tell you like cups wasn't cheap, right? And so the thing is like if we really understood, you know, what we could do, you know, and be able to create our own wealth, create our own legacy, stop acting like we actually need something from someone else or need that. I think that's where these conversations come. It's like, how do you find your power in the things that you have already? How do you find power in doing things that maybe you didn't think would create a good life for you? You know what I mean? Because you're not in that lane. You know, I talk about, you know, I was an athlete when I first started, like adaptive athlete, competing, bodybuilding, CrossFit. And I did, you know, I still work out. I just don't share it a lot because I realized that most people, you know, especially with disability, you know, the only lane that people see is sports, you know, so Paralympics, you know, working out, like, and so it was more of an inspiring story, but there was no entrepreneurship in that. There was no actual, like a bigger vision in that. It was just me doing some shit without my legs and everybody thinking that was amazing, you know, but once they started, I always talk about it, but once they started asking me continuously to climb a rope in my wheelchair, I had to realize I wasn't the monkey. And that was when I started to open up different lanes. I became a model, I became a speaker, I became all these other things that they didn't want me to be because I was only in a lane that was fitted for me. You see what I mean? And just as a person with a disability and then being Black on top of that. So when you were speaking about, you know, certain areas, you know, that we don't get the representation in, you know, I think that a lot of it is intentionally done. So we have to go back and, you know, reference to what you said earlier about being intentional about the things that we're doing today to make sure that it's leaving impact in others, but also creating what we haven't seen. You know, like I would love, like literally just looking at your work on your Instagram is constantly inspiring just because I followed a lot of people that are in the work that you're doing, none of them Black, you know, and so for me, it's actually a beautiful thing to see because now I have something that I could share with individuals that give them that representation of themselves, you know, and I think that that's the legacy. Legacy is being able to see representation of yourself to find that particular lane or create, you know, you can reinvent the wheel in a sense, but it, you know, perfect it. And I think, you know, when we're looking at our legacies and looking at things like that, we're not finding perfection because there's no representation.
Yeah,
You know?
and there's space for everybody. You know, there. I feel like Alecia now, like I have all these notes now from everything you guys said, but there's space. Like, one, I was listening to you mention, like throughout this whole 28 days of Black history, you know, you're like, yeah, there's Black history, but they don't highlight Black people with disabilities. And it made me very curious because more Black people have disabilities than other populations. And you think of some of the reasons why, socioeconomic reasons, laborers, you know, even back in the industrial age, like they're more, you were more prone to get a finger sliced off or a hand sliced off. Veterans, you know, aging, poor nutrition. There's so many factors that contribute to people becoming ill and becoming ill, and as a result of that, ending up with some kind of physical, mental, visual disability. A disability does not mean that you're ill and not functional. It just means that there is an obstacle, there's a difference. And when I was looking up the history, so we have a newsletter, everybody. I feel like Alecia now, like, check out our Open Spaces newsletter. Every week we've been dropping newsletters, and it's like, nobody ever really talked about the fact that Harriet Tubman had epilepsy. Like, she had a disability. Nobody highlights that. They highlight she was a badass too. You know what I mean? And it all goes together. You can't take away her epilepsy and take away the fact that she was a woman and take away that she was strong. All of that holistically made her who she is. This week's highlight is Stevie Wonder. Child prodigy, a genius. He lost his sight when he was born, and he lost his sight after he was born because there was too much oxygen in the incubator. And that's where we see, like, we've moved forward in a lot of ways, but we need to support each other and embrace everything. In LA, that's where I grew up, somebody that, it wasn't violent all the time or anything like that. But you talk about, like, somebody may have gotten into a fight, had a gang shootout, Pookie's in a wheelchair. That's my cousin. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like it was so different. And why do we not show that? And I think that's important. I wanted to tap in also to, like you said, representation matters. What we do matters. And Alecia, like you were talking about, Black women don't breastfeed that much. I breastfed because my aunts sat around and breastfed all day long. And that's what I knew because that's what I saw. But society tried to push away against that. Brothers like, oh, we don't want to see her titty hanging out. Or the fact that, no, you got to get up and you got to go to work in 6 weeks. You don't have time to be sitting around. That's a luxury. But guess who were the nursemaids to the white kids on the plantations? So it's not outside of our culture. And I do think it's important that we recognize this. But when we talk about Black joy, the deep Black joy, I'm so happy that you tied that into wellness, Alecia. Like, and I would love to, like, have you share a little bit more about that.
Yes, of course. And thank you both for, sharing that. One of the things that I focus on is thinking about creativity as a wellness practice. And so I think about creativity and intuition to be very similar. And it can be those, like, really subtle moments where you feel like your inner voice is talking to you. That's just like, oh, maybe I should go left and go right. Or maybe I should make spaghetti for dinner instead of whatever, this rice dish. And also think about, in another sense, in a more physical sense, right, of thinking about birth, right, like creating, like, life with your body. And also creativity as art making, right? And thinking about, and that's the creativity that a lot of people can identify with. Like, I made a picture for Mother's Day, or I have this Picasso in my house that is art. And I think all of those things are expressions of the creative practice that can allow people to access their wellness journey. And what I mean by that is I think that those creative practices are examples of you walking in your own path and walking in ways that are closer to yourself and closer to whatever you need in this life experience. And I think often when you're on that creative path, when you're whether that's creating a product or a person, right? People can't see where you are, what your outcome is going to be. Like, it's Sunday and I'm going to be logging on to church after this. Eyes have not seen, ears have not heard, right? Like, that's where I'm coming from. And I literally, for me, that means, like, people don't know what the journey is ahead of you, which is why when you were speaking, Wes, about people wanted you to, like, climb a rope in your wheelchair, and you were like, nah, I'm not going to be performing. Like, and I think we all find ourselves in these spaces where, like, oh, upon deep reflection, I'm noticing that I need to make a shift. And like, let me try all these other things. I'm going to try modeling and in entrepreneurship in different ways. And I think about whenever Steve Jobs and Apple made the iPad, there was an interview where they said, the interviewer was like, so what focus group did you do to get the iPad? And there, so that people, so that we can get to this product. And they said that people didn't know they needed an iPad. Like, we just made it. Like, they didn't know there was no focus group. Like, we made this product, and I think that's like a really deep creative practice. Like, someone's like, I have this idea and I have a lot of money and wealth and all this legacy, blah, 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 right? Here connected with Apple, and I made a product that people appreciate. And I think that most people don't know the fullness of you, right? That you can become. Most people don't know your potential, and they will keep you in a certain area, in a certain section that they can identify with you, where they are most comfortable with you. And whether that means they're most comfortable with you as their entertainment or as their education, or things that they can learn from you. Most people aren't thinking about like, and some people are your friends and your BFFs or whatever, but people, in larger communities, they, I don't think people have the capacity to really think about your creative expression of yourself. And so that's why I think, when I think about that creativity as a wellness practice, I think, what are your deepest desires? What does your intuition tell you? And like, how do we cultivate those moments to express our creativity in ways that are so vast and broad, that are like so small, like, let me make this text message less funky right now, or let me make this delicious peanut butter and jelly sandwich in a way that is loving, or maybe make this life decision. And I think one of the ways for me that has been expressed is I enjoy, like, I know I'll wrap it up in a second. I enjoy like, I have my entrepreneurial journey has been vast, right? I have had an ice cream shop. I have had a yoga studio. I have had, nonprofit kind of like corporate leadership space, positions. And sometimes I used to think, like, I feel like I'm all over the place sometimes. Like, I feel like I'm doing all these different things, like, but I feel so inspired. Like, I feel like deep joy and clarity that I should be doing these things. But whenever I kind of compare myself to other people in these spaces who are maybe doing things that maybe appear to be more consistent, I have felt like, oh, maybe I'm just all over the place. I need to just kind of pick one thing and do it. And then I had to back up and say, wait a second. I know that I've seen entrepreneurs out in the world who are billionaires who have done the same thing, right? So my lack of access to money and resources doesn't make me any less qualified to be able to pivot and experience my creative professional practices in ways that bring me joy. And also beginning to think about, whenever you really step back and think about and really begin to, reflect and meditate over some of the decisions that you've made, that's when we begin to notice those through lines that are present in your work, that can allow you that can give you more direction and inspiration and affirmation of your gifts. And so I just think about very broadly of how, when we are searching for joy and we are searching for like our best selves or even our higher selves, I think it's those creative practices in very subtle ways and very reflective ways that will allow us to be able to kind of grow into that fullness and kind of grow into our own legacy.
I love that. And I was not unmuting to shut you down. I was unmuting because it hit me. And then I have to hold myself back. I'm like, April, give people space, because I want to jump in. Taking the shift away from Black pain. I think Black pain is so sensationalized in our society. And I know sometimes I'll be reading a bunch of books and I'm like, I don't want to hear about one more person that got beat, hung, or shot. Like, you know what I mean? And it's like, I'm tired of having like every book or every movie or every TV show sensationalizing our pain. And I'm so glad I've seen a shift in our, I've been watching Abbott Elementary. I can watch it with my 15-year-old son. Nobody's going to take off their clothes. Nobody's going to start cussing. You know what I mean? And I can relate.
It's such a good show.
Isn't it great?
It's so funny.
Oh my God. It reminds me of when I came out of college working at LAUSD, what's up, LaSalle? No, but I could relate to it. And it didn't, and they talk about real issues without sensationalizing it. So I love that your focus is through the arts and through joy that we can really, tap into like our holistic, our healthiest selves. That's why I was interjecting, because I was really excited. But we are coming to the end, which, Alecia, we're going to have you back because we got to keep on going with this. But we want to talk about some things that do bring you joy and edification. Wes and I have been talking about some books that we've been reading, podcasts, music, and I'm curious to hear what you've been reading. Wes, I want to share what I've been reading and hear what you're going to say, because I think you read this book and you had some opinions about it. But Alecia, what's on your nightstand or in your earbuds? What have you been listening to, reading, and getting into?
Sure. Yes, I have a few books on my nightstand and in my bags. The Secret Life of Church Ladies is actually right next to my bed, by Deisha Philyaw, and she's a Pittsburgher who this book was optioned by HBO for a show. It's amazing. And I began to read this book, and I was, let me just do some light reading before bed. Man, this book is not going to put you to sleep. I was like, oh my God, there's too much happening in this. This is too much. This is bringing up a lot. So if you want to go to sleep, don't read that book. But if you want to be energized and interested in life, please read Secret Life of Church Ladies. I'm also reading by Deisha Philyaw. And it's a good book. And I'm also reading The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And I was like on a talk with her, and I learned that it was the 30th anniversary for The Artist's Way, which is a wonderful kind of reference for it, exploring your creative practice and being like a recovering artist. And it's also the foundation for morning pages. A lot of people are familiar with morning pages. And so that's the book that it came out of. And as far as podcasts, I'm listening to a lot of Hidden Brain, because it's just my jam. It's just my jam.
Thank you. Well, I wrote all that down, and we're going to share that with our listeners and viewers too. And maybe I was thinking today, Wes, like we just legit need to do like a book club talk, because there's so much I want to talk with you about. So before I get into it, now I'm in the sun, but Pause Rest Be by Octavia Rahim. She will be on March 20th. We're doing a book club with her. She is going to read from her book. Alecia, if you would let me gift you a book. Wes and I would love to gift you a book, because we do have some books. And if you set aside March 20th, we would love for you and other people to join us. It'll be our book club as a collective. But I love her. I did 4 months of rest and restoration with her. And it was, pretty life-changing. I'm excited to have her. She is a yoga. She's out of Atlanta. She's in Georgia, but okay, that's one book, so everybody know that. So the boys got this for Christmas.
Yay.
And when I started reading and listening to it, I was like, well, go ahead, Will. Okay. I didn't know what to expect. And when you talk about legacy and history, I am, he and I are of the same generation. And I just love, I love hip hop. I love hip hop history. I love,
definitely.
I'm old school Tribe. I'm back in the day. But so what did you? I know, Wes, you read it already, and you were like,
definitely read it. I had to get more. I had to get more through the first part to really get the knowledge that was dropped. I wasn't against it. I did have I listened to the audio book first, and so I had about the regular version to kind of articulate what was being said, just because I felt like Will was reading, but it didn't sound like his words, and so that's what because I'm big on audio book, and the only reason why is because I like to listen to the author kind of the way they say it, how it's written. And so sometimes it can throw me off. So I did have to dig in a different way and really found, I thought it was powerful from this, like the knowledge being dropped, because you could catch the expression when there was certain, like, this is what I said compared to this is what someone kind of rephrased what I said.
Okay.
And so that was where it kind of threw me off. But no, definitely, I love that you're reading it, because Will's amazing. Plus, drop a little bomb. The director of the new Bel Air show is actually from Kansas City, from home. And so I just had to throw that out because it's been amazing, to see that journey and just see a Black visionary coming from where I come from and just do something, and his vision blows up like it is. And Will invested in that. So just because of the book being shared, I wanted to kind of give some flowers to Will, because Will, he helped the city out with that one. So.
That's a good one. I'm glad you did that. And I'm glad I'm reading it, because I had just finished another book, which was so good, I didn't want to read anything else. And when you get let down, you're like, nothing else is going to be as good, which was my book, The Vanishing Half, that I read last month and shared. I don't know if you've read that book, Alecia, or heard about The Vanishing Half. And it really touched me, because I came from a family of light-skinned people. And I understand some of that happened in my history. So that was good. So thank you, Alecia. We're going to share your two books, because now that you told me that the Church Lady, the Secret Life of Church Ladies.
Yeah, it's scandalous. So girls.
And you too is that Will's mom is from Homestead.
Hey.
Oh.
Yes. Which
We're not
you're not in Pittsburgh. Well, you describe it, because I'm not a native, Alecia. I'll let you speak to Homestead's origins.
Next to Pittsburgh. I don't have the history of the, geography of Pittsburgh area. Homestead is right next to Pittsburgh.
Has it always been primarily an all Black community?
See, you asking for all those facts about Homestead, and I don't have it. Another thing about my legacy is
Homewood. She said Homewood.
Okay.
That's why you don't let me talk about stuff from Pittsburgh, you guys, because I don't know.
Okay.
Thanks,
I'm like, Homestead. It's kind of right next to Pittsburgh. It's across the bridge. It's a completely different space. Homewood is a primarily Black community in the east side of Pittsburgh. It's Pittsburgh is full of rolling mountains and hills. It's one of the flatter spaces. It's one of the in one of the larger stretches of flat land in Pittsburgh. And actually my great grandfather was from Homewood as well. He grew up there. And actually that's how my dad and my mother met. My dad came to Pittsburgh from Virginia. He lived in Homewood, and my mom was braiding hair, and that's how they hooked up. So there's some facts about Homewood. I'm like, I don't really know about Homestead. It's outside of Pittsburgh. So Homewood, I'm like, it's the population density, blah blah blah. So
that's why you don't let a California girl try to drop any Pittsburgh knowledge. I knew that.
I love it.
I was real surprised when he said my mom's from Homewood. I was like, what?
Wow.
It's that cool legacy.
So April, before we finish, I want to drop my book.
Yes, go ahead.
Gotta drop my book. The book I'm reading actually is called Battle Cry. It's by Jason Wilson, and I met him when I was doing a Black History Month Gymshark campaign last month, and I didn't know much about his story, but he really, if I needed Black men to read books, I think it would be his. And just because he talks about masculinity, vulnerability, legacy, history, and he just talks about authentically being able to cry. I think that it's those small things of the power in crying, the power, in channeling your anger as a Black man. And then even for him to take acknowledgement of his anger as a Black man in his relationships and how that shifted his mind and everything. So Battle Cry, Jason Wilson, powerful book. Black men, Black women, everyone can read it, but definitely for Black men, I would love for them to tap in.
All right, thank you. So I have our little book list. First Ladies, The Artist's Way, Battle Cry, and Will Smith's book. We will put that on our book list for you guys in our newsletter. We'll drop it in our chat. And then Octavia Rahim's Pause, Rest, Be. you all have opportunities this month that we'll share with you to also win a free copy. Alecia, we are going to gift you a copy.
So excited.
Oh, I know. Isn't she like a beautiful spirit? It's going to be wonderful. And shoot, me and Alecia are going to be doing some stuff too, you guys. So I already got her reeled in. We got studio space. We're going to have some joy and some rest and restoration and some healing. Again, an hour was a good amount of time. We were able to get some really, I got a lot of wisdom and some nuggets in. Alecia, thank you so, so, so much. Thank your family for letting you escape.
I escaped. My cape, like all they saw was like the poof of wind and smoke as I shut the door.
Your husband's like, "Where'd she go? Where's the babies?"
Mommy, shut. I'm like,
thank you. We look forward to doing this again next month, you all. March 20th, we're going to meet around noon as opposed to our regular 10 a.m. time. We're going to have some book club time. We're going to get cozy. Any closing words, Alecia, that you have?
Oh, I just hope that folks are watching now and later that you are able to take time to experience your joy practice, no matter how big or how small, that you are fully present in it, and that it is an opportunity for you to live well.
That was beautiful. No matter how big or how small. Thank you. Well, enjoy. We got sun out here today, Wes. You?
Yep.
Let's enjoy it. I love you guys.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Your weekend. Bye.